Hey there everybody, it's Mike DiLisio, and today I'm going to be taking a look at the solo mode for Dungeon Drop from designer Scott R. Smith and publisher Phase Shift Games. In Dungeon Drop, you are playing as an adventurer who is delving through a dungeon, encountering monsters, and trying to collect loot, treasures, and ultimately points. I'll show you how the game plays. We'll head over to the table, then we'll come back here and I'll let you know what I think about it. Okay, so let's talk about the solo spelunker mode for Dungeon Drop. A couple of things I want to point out is that there are a few components that are specific to the solo game. Number one is you've got this solo spelunker relic tracker card here and a little token that you'll be using to track the number of relics that you may collect throughout the game. Also, we've got these pillar tokens that you're going to see how these work in just a moment. And we've got some different cubes. We've got, that I've just dropped here, we've got our 2 relic cubes, and we also have our staircase cube. And so, when you set the initial dungeon, the difference in the solo game is that in addition to the small cubes and the dragon, like you normally would, you're also going to be placing in those relic cubes, the staircase cube, and your player meeple, and you're going to be dropping the dungeon. A couple of other things I want to point out that are specific to the solo mode is that if you do choose to play or get randomly drawn this Hawkman hero, it's going to work a little bit differently in the solo mode. There's just a little slight difference with how their power works. And there are 3 quests that you would want to remove because they are not compatible with the solo mode. That's Hero's Help, Hoarder's Hunt, and Scout's Specialty. So you just would want to make sure you took those out so that they would not be a potential quest. So maybe instead I drew Vanguard's Vermin here as my opening quest, and I would be playing just in an example here as the half-orc Beastmaster, all right? So as per normal, you would then go ahead and you would drop the dungeon. I should also point out here on the front end that some of the things that you see here are not necessarily standard with the game as it comes. These walls and the playmat are things that you can get that additionally kind of add to the game, but they're not necessary for play. I'm just putting them here because I do think that they improve the experience and figured I would show them off for you. So, all right, we're now ready to drop the dungeon. So we've got all of our cubes and our player meeple in here, including those relic cubes and the staircase cube. And you're going to go ahead and you're going to drop this over the play area. They say about 6 to 12 inches above it. And there we go. We have dropped our dungeon and we're ready to get started with the game. So the first thing that you're going to do is enter the dungeon. You do this at the beginning and you do this anytime that you are going to descend to a new dungeon level. And you are going to create a room that your meeple is in, all right? And so what you're going to do is you're going to find the pillar cubes, which are these gray cubes, and you are going to replace the 3 that denote the room with these pillar tokens, all right? So right now, I've got this, this, and this that are going to be that's going to be my room. Actually, I could do this, this, and this. Maybe I'll do that so that I can actually get a cube in there, all right? So this is going to be just kind of off to the side here. Actually, that's going to be removed, sorry. And then we'll do, let's do this one, and then we'll do this one. All right, so I'm contained within this little room here. I can actually loot this token, this cube, which is already got 1 point for me here because of my Vanguard's Vermin quest card. All right, so once you have got that kind of set up, your initial room, now what you're going to do on this turn and on subsequent turns is you're going to go through a small process where you will first explore, then act, and then move. And then at the end of your turn, you are going to continue to do that until a number of things may occur. So now that I have dropped the dungeon, I'm going to take the large cubes that had not been placed in yet. Those are going to get placed in here. And the explore action, or phase I should say, is just randomly drawing 4 of these cubes out without looking at them, You pick out 4 cubes, and then you drop them above the room that you are in, okay? So there they go. I just kind of moved myself a little bit, but you don't loot the room right now, even if there were treasure that were in that room. Then you can activate any one race or class ability, all right? Now, throughout the game, there might be ways that you can get more of each of these, and you still can only do 1 per game, but you're going to, 1 per level, I should say, but you're going to choose whether you want to do that again. So perhaps I wanted to use my bash ability, which is flicking a monster, or I might want to use this Beastmaster ability, which is flick 1 small monster and collect the first treasure that it hits. So right now, I know that these blue cubes are extra juicy because they're worth 3 points. So maybe I can flick this goblin here into that blue cube, and I missed. If I'd hit it, I could have collected that, but now I tap that, I've used my Beastmaster ability. I'm not going to be able to use that again until I go into a different level, okay? Now what I'm going to do is move. When you move, you're going to choose one of these pillar tokens, and you are going to swap it with a different pillar to create a new room, and then you're going to move into that room. Now, I like this because this is worth points. Now that goblin is in there, so I'm going to have to kind of deal with taking a little bit of damage, but I think it's worth it for me. So I'm going to swap out this token in this cube, then I move into this room, and I loot this room, all right? So I take these, and then I also have to take this goblin, and there's 1 damage for me, but it also is going to be points, all right? So you are going to continue to go through this process where you are going to explore, then act if you choose to do so, and then move until a couple of different things can happen. If there are no more cubes in this box to explore, then you've gotten lost in the dungeon and you've lost. If you cannot move into a new room that won't kill your hero because there's too many monsters in there for the amount of health that you have, then you've been consumed by the dungeon and you lose the game. Or if you loot a room that contains the staircase, then you can choose to exit the level and continue on at that point. Once you've exited the level, you then have to determine if you have completed it successfully, and then you're going to decide whether to proceed deeper into the dungeon or leave and enter retirement. And so the way you find out if you have successfully completed the level is first you would set aside any relic cubes you might have collected. If you had collected any of these relic cubes, you would set those aside. And then you're going to total up your score just as the way the standard game would. So, for example, in this case, I'd be counting that for 3, that for 2, that for 1. Small monsters would score 1. You would add 4 to that because of this particular one. I would most certainly have had other cubes here. I wouldn't have exited the level this early, but just assuming I had other things, you would add those up. And then you're going to consult the rule book here, and it's going to tell you what you need to have a successful completion. So if you had not collected any of the relic fragments yet, and even if you had collected one this round, you wouldn't immediately add that would come in later. You're going to need a particular score requirement. So in the case of the first time, you would need 15 points plus your total hero's health. So in this case with the half-orc, 25 points. If I had successfully done that, then I have completed the level, and you go through a bit of a process where you claim new relics, you move the relic tracker up 1. So let's say I had caught 1, I would go ahead and put it there. And now my requirement for the future is going to be higher, because you're going deeper, it's going to get more difficult. Then you decide whether you want your hero to enter into retirement or continue adventuring. If you level up, then you can increase up to 2 times based upon relic cubes. You can get an additional class card. If you collected a huge monster, you can draw an additional class card as well. And then you can refresh your abilities, you gain a new quest, reset the dungeons, and can continue on that way. If you do retire, whether out of choice or because you don't have any other option, you're going to get a bit of a kind of a score here based upon how many relic fragments you collected. So obviously, the deeper you go down into the dungeon, the more relic fragments that you collect, and obviously making the game more difficult, the more of a glorious title you may get, or a legacy as it calls here. So either you didn't save squat, 2, you have become a legend, you've saved the entire world, and your family's lineage will enjoy a prosperous future. All right, well, that is the solo spelunker mode of Dungeon Drop in an overview. Let's head back over and I'll let you know what I think about it. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a kind of a high-level overview on how the solo mode for Dungeon Drop works. Just keeping in mind that I was kind of setting up a dungeon so that it would be within the camera frame. You could make a larger one, you can make a smaller one. There's really no constraints about that. But I kind of set up those walls so A, you can see how those work, and B, so that they fit within the frame. But just pointing that out right up at the front. The first thing I want to do is talk about some solo benchmarks. These are some high-level things that I like to assess when I'm deciding whether to get a solo game off the shelf or not. And the first is the win-loss condition. Is this playing against an automated opponent, or is it a beat your high score type of a situation? And in Dungeon Drop, it's closer to the high score variant. It's not, I don't know that I would say it's exclusively that, because there is a bit of a win-loss situation that can happen as well. You may just unsuccessfully you might lose. You might explore too much and not be able to find your way out of the dungeon. You can get lost. You can get consumed by the dungeon. You could, lose health. So there is a bit of a win-loss, but if you continue to delve deeper and deeper in the dungeon, and then you can decide to retire at any point there, and then determine how you did according to the number of relics that you collected. So it's a little bit of a hybrid system, but it's one that works, I think. I'm perfectly happy with that kind of win-loss condition in this game. The other thing to do is talk about setup and teardown, and really, I mean, you saw me do it there on the video. There's not much to it. You get a couple of cards, you get your racing class, you get your quest, you put the cubes in and you dump them on the table. I mean, actually the setup is part of the fun of this game, this idea of just dumping components all over the table. There is something satisfying about that. Here on the Dice Tower, we have a long history of component drops, and this kind of puts it into the setup, which is kind of nice. The other thing I want to talk about is rules as part of these benchmarks. And a bit of a mixed bag here. This is not a terribly complex game. It's not very rules heavy, and that's a good thing. But there were times that I felt that I wish the rules had gone into a little bit more detail. So I guess I would say that the rules are functional, but not exhaustive. And in a game like this, I'm going to be talking about that more when we get it further into the review. You have to kind of maybe have different expectations that you would with some other games, certainly like a Euro style game where the rules are much more concrete and have to be followed and have a very particular flow. A game like this, which is very, very silly and really in many ways a party type game, the rules are going to have to be looked at slightly different. And so I did take that into account when I'm discussing them. I do wish there were a couple of things that had been more explicitly described and explained, but overall they were functional. Again, in the spirit of this game, I wasn't too concerned about having every edge case covered. All right, art and components. First, I'm going to start with a couple of things that did not work as well for me, and then some things that I did like. It is my opinion that you really do need to have either the walls like you saw with me and some type of a playmat or some type of a proxy, okay, to not get frustrated, all right, to reduce frustration. If you play it without that, if you play like on a hard table with no barriers at all, these things can scatter. They just will by their nature scatter all over the place. And so I am of the opinion that this is the best experience for it is on a table that has some type of padding, whether it's a play mat, a neoprene of some type, and some type of barrier, okay? Even if you were to put it inside of a larger box with some type of, padding at the bottom, that could work as well. But I do think that there could be a bit of annoyance and frustration trying to hunt down these little cubes if you don't have some type of barrier around that. The other thing is that while I think that the art overall is cute, and art is such a personal thing, I think that the character art is cute. I don't love the graphic design of the cards. They don't really fit my taste. They seem a little bit, I don't know, I'm struggling to find the right adjective for it, but they don't really appeal to me, the graphic design. They seem a little cheap. If that's the word that's coming to mind, although it's not exactly what I'm trying to get at. Again, the art in general is fine, but I don't love the design of the cards. They are functional, but maybe not too appealing to me. Now, I do love the actual components, the cubes, which is the main element of this game are going to be those cubes, right? That makes up the vast majority of the components. I really do like the different cubes, the mixture of the different media, the acrylic cubes, the clear translucent cubes, the screen printed wooden cubes. I really, really like those a lot. And since that's the thing you're interacting with most in the game, that's the most important component to get right, and I really feel like they did. I also do like the fact that although unique, out of the ordinary sized boxes can sometimes be problematic when you're talking about shelving a game, I really do feel like this strange shaped box works because it all is also part of the component of the game. You're drawing from it, you are dumping it. So I feel like even though this is a strange shaped box that maybe isn't going to fit perfectly on every shelf out there, it is it works well for this game because, again, it's part of the actual component to the game itself. All right, so the overall solo experience. First, I'll start with what didn't work as well for me, and then again, continuing on with the things that I did appreciate. The first negative, and it's probably the biggest negative that I have for this game, and for some people it's going to be such a negative that they're going to want to avoid it altogether. So that's why I'm bringing it up right at the beginning, is that for this game, you have to be okay with ambiguity, with edge cases, with slightly fuzzy and unclear rules, with, hey, my initial drop, my meeple isn't within a room. What do I do? Well, the rules don't say. Well, look, for me, just redrop it, until it gets into a valid spot. You have to be okay with stuff like that. Is this loot in this room? Is it touching this imaginary line between the pillars? You know what? It's a solo game. If you say it is, then it is. If it's that close, that type of a thing. If you want clear cut and completely rock solid rules, this isn't it. That's not the experience that I feel like this game is trying to get across. It's not the type of experience that it's trying to evoke. So you do have to be aware of that. If that type of game isn't for you, then maybe this one won't be for you. But if you don't mind that in a game that is really all about the silly, then there are some things that I think you'll like. Here are some of the things that I like. And it's related to that. This game is all about silly fun. I feel like from the very get-go, you can just, the whole notion of this game is ridiculous. Of taking a bunch of cubes that represent monsters and loot and dumping them all over the table and just kind of seeing where things go. Hey, here's your dungeon. It's such a silly, ridiculous idea, but it's fun. There's just something absolutely fun about it. It's almost, and I mentioned this before, it's almost a party game. And I appreciate that. I don't usually love a lot of party games, but I like the fact that this game is not afraid to lean into the silly. Also, as a solo game, I feel like this is almost wholly unique in this space. I can't think of another party/dexterity game that has such a robust solo mode. Like, I've played some dexterity games that have little solo variant type things where they're almost like practice modes usually. Like, hey, this is a flicking game. Here's a way to play it solo where you can kind of practice how to flick these things. This is not that. This is a wholly unique solo mode that has its own distinct place. And I really appreciate that. I really feel like it's nice when you come across a solo game that does not fill a lot, that fills a unique place, that doesn't look like 20 or 30 other games that you've played before. So I do appreciate that. And the other thing that I do think is a positive for this game is that while it is unique, this Solo Spelunker is a unique variant, and it has slightly different rules to Dungeon Drop, it doesn't feel like you're playing a different game. You're still playing the core experience that makes Dungeon Drop what it is. Again, for better or for worse, depending upon what you feel about this type of a game with some kind of loose, ambiguous possibilities in the rules. So for me, mostly because I feel like it does exactly what it sets out to do, which is to provide a silly dexterity experience for solo gamers that actually has a mode that was there with purpose, right? This is not something you could tell that was just like thrown on at the end. This is a purposeful solo mode, and I appreciate that. And because it fulfills such a unique place within the solo gaming space, I'm giving Dungeon Drop as a solo game a 7 out of 10 seal of approval. There are some things about it that are going to, maybe be frustrating to people. Again, knowing that the rules ambiguities could be there, certain things you have to kind of, figure out on your own. But if you're willing to overlook that stuff and just lean into the silly fun that this game has to offer, I think that you might find it to be a compelling experience. All right, well, that's it for me. This is Mike DiLisio signing off from Dice Tower headquarters.